Probably the most important news I've ever seen since mankind's existence on this planet, I would say. And I think maybe I'm even understating its importance. I can't think of a more important step forward for all of mankind. GGPO has a new home, and it's now available under the MIT license. Get it here. GGPO is now free. Anybody can go and access it. And you can put GGPO in your game without having to worry about an expensive licensing fee or anything like that, which, first of all, it was cited to be notoriously cheap before. But instead of being notoriously cheap, it's actually free. They've made GGPO free with the MIT license. So you can just go get GGPO. I'm not a software developer, so I don't know exactly what the MIT license means. I just know that it's free and it's available to get. No excuses, baby. It's right there on the screen. If you, the fan, want this in your favorite fighting game, you can tell them, hey, in the future, we want this. Now, look, one thing I should say about GGPO, it's not easy to just add it. Like right now, be like, oh, I want to put GGPO, go to GGPO, copy, paste, my game now has rollback netcode. It's not that simple. You do have to commit to building a game with GGPO in mind, and this has to be something you add in here. In fact, there's a list of the things your game needs. It says, like, if you want rollback netcode, these are the 3 main bullet points you need. And it describes how games are needed to be coded and created to have GGPO work. And, you know, it's not like it's like, okay, well, now that it's out there, everybody can just add it in, right? It's like, okay, well, now that it's out there and it's free and it's available for everybody to use, like somebody just mentioned in the chat, and I was going to say, it needs to be translated to other languages so developers can probably more easily use it. If you want to use it on your game and it's not out, it's in development, it's probably like one of those things, if it's not very early in development, just adding it to your game is going to be hard. I wouldn't expect Uniclear or GG 2020 to have rollback netcode in it unless they were just planning to put rollback in from the start. Now, whether this is something that in the future could be implemented or something like that, totally possible now, right? Because it just exists and it's right there. And if you want them to add it to the game, you can just point them in the direction of GGPO and say, hey, this exists, it's out, it's right there on the screen. If you want this, you can have it. The main thing is you have to get companies interested in wanting to use GGPO and to see why GGPO is so great, or any rollback solution, right? That's well implemented. This alone is not enough to get games to improve their netcode. It takes the consumer and people kicking down doors, being like, hey, you motherfuckers, we want good netcode. Please put good netcode in your game. You can't just say, oh, well, now that it's out there, I'm sure they'll do it. GGPO has been available for 10 years. Right? This is the most available and easily accessible it's been, but it's been available for 10 years if people really wanted to use it. It's been available or it's been innovated on for a long time, but yeah, it still hasn't been added. Like, I'm adding Thed63 to the list of lovely subscribers. Thanks very much. You just have to keep asking and keep demanding for the basic fighting game features that are still missing from so many different games, right? So somebody asked, in your experience, has the difficulty of the algorithm been the primary issue preventing adoption of rollback? I've always assumed companies chose to avoid rollback-based approaches because of the CPU cost, etc. The algorithm is not particularly difficult to implement if you understand the approach. The biggest technical obstacle for existing engine is probably separating simulation from rendering and fast serialization of game state. That being said, there are companies like NRS who have developed outstanding rollback implementations in very old systems not designed for it. In many cases, I think it's a matter of prioritization rather than one of feasibility. So he's saying it's always been possible, it's just how much you care to make it happen. What's funny is, like a week ago, a lot of people were really mad that GGPO didn't have a website and then it was hard to get in contact with them. And the cannons were like, well, you know, the reason we don't have a website is because we had these really, really bad DDoS attacks a while ago. It just cost us so much money and our ISP was threatening us and we had all these issues and stuff. And then the Unis dev asked about rollback. And a week later, they're like, hey, you know what? Not only do we now have a place where you can go get GGPO, but it's free for everybody. Just fucking take it. You just click on this link and you get this fucking thing here and it's there. It's free for commercial and non-commercial use, and you don't even have to credit them. It's not required, but appreciated. Erebus Wolf says, I reached out to the Cannons a few years ago to ask about GGPO when I was futzing with Unity and trying to make a fighting game. They were super helpful via email. So all the stories I've heard about the Cannons asking about GGPO stuff, everybody has told me they've been super helpful. In fact, I know that many of the companies that have implemented GGPO or similar rollback solutions when they've asked the cannons have offered advice on how to make it work correctly, and even in some cases flown out to offices and offered their help. Stadia gonna use GGPO? Oh boy, this Stadia fucking shit this morning. Come on, man. What is it? Negative prediction frames or some shit? Stay woke. They only released the GGPO code because it's obsolete thanks to negative latency. Jesus. What does that even mean? Games are gonna be, he said games will be better than offline because of negative latency with the prediction algorithm that they have involved. Now look, I can say a lot of really nice things about rollback, netcode, and GGPO, which is a predictive solution, but you know, GGPO is not they don't predict in negative frames, all right? They predict, and if they're wrong, they adjust. The Stadia is gonna just fucking, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Predicts? What are you gonna predict? You predict I'm mashing on wake up? Hey, don't you fucking assume anything about me, Stadia, you motherfucker. You don't know me, bitch. Don't assume my latency or my brain frequency, okay? Yeah, why even go to Evo? We can all just hook our brains up to the Stadia and play from home. Isn't this so cool, though? This gives more and more chances for people to implement rollback into whatever projects they're interested in. So if you have a peer-to-peer game that's 1v1 and you want to add rollback netcode into it, whether it's a fighting game or not, that shit is great. You know what's interesting is that a lot of the modern rollback solutions are built off of GGPO or off of some similar rollback, but it's not exactly GGPO. Most of the games with GGPO, I feel like, are older titles that have just had it added, right? To be honest, fighting games are so good for rollback. The way fighting games are built is generally pretty good for rollback because there's lots of times in fighting games where once you're committed to an action, the action has to complete before you can do anything else. And because of that, it makes like rollback a really good solution for how fighting games work online. It's so good for our games where you hit a heavy punch and you whiff a big button. And during that entire heavy punch animation, even if there's lag of any kind, from the start of the heavy punch until the last frame, it won't affect the game at all because this heavy punch is just coming out and it's going. And whatever other shit you're inputting in that time does not matter at all because it's just this action has occurred and it's going to complete. In fighting games, you'd be surprised how the connection is going has no impact on a match when you have rollback. Because there's so many times where you're locked into some animation or long startup of something on a fighting game where you can't input or impact what's happening on the screen. You just do something, and during that entire period, you can't change anything, and no connection, quality, or issue or anything will affect what you can do. If you forward dash and your dash is 20 frames, it's 20 frames of you dashing. It doesn't matter if the connection goes haywire in those frames at all, even if like you lose 3 or 4 frames or, you know, the connection spikes or something like that. In 20 frames, it's just you're dashing during those frames and it's just you're dashing. Yeah, and also your combo timing will feel very consistent. Wow, there is. I did not realize there's this doc folder is literally the breakdown of what is GGPO? How does it work? In theory, this is what it looks like. In practice, this is what it looks like. Yeah, a brief explanation of rollback is kind of hard. I think that explanation is a good one. I was going to say the thing about rollback is that unlike a standard delay-based netcode, which has to wait to see what your opponent is giving you and then see that it has it and then show it on your screen as well. So there's this constant delay where the game chugs, and if any connection quality is dropped at all, the game freezes or stutters or has like really bad feelings. In rollback, the game will continue going. And because it's predictive, it can say, well, you know, in the case that was just happening there, your opponent was walking forward 1 frame ago. We missed like 2 frames, and now it came back. We can just assume that they were still walking forward. And if for some reason there is this big drop in lag or whatever, the game will just show you still walking forward, right? If for some reason, you know, it comes back, the connection stabilizes, and it turns out in that time, during that frame, they were actually walking backwards, rollback will show it you instead kind of like teleporting backward. That's when there's bad rollback or something. But if for that one instance you continue walking forward for 2 frames, it just shows the character walking forward and you don't see any lag at all. If there's a very laggy case, you walk forward and teleport backwards for 2 frames or whatever you lost. If you're playing a delay-based solution and you lose that much time, instead the game will just fucking chug and just go ooh, and just skip out, right? Or you drop your combo, or you can't dash, or you miss some input and the game just freaks out on you. That's what it looks like in a delay-based solution. The majority of the time, you don't see rollbacks. The majority of the time, when you're watching good rollback, not shitty Street Fighter V rollback, good rollback, if there is lag, you will probably only see visual teleporting like a very, very, very small percentage of the time. You will not see it like 99% of the time. If there's lag of any kinds, you won't see it. It's not noticeable. However, if there's delay-based netcode and the game lags, you will see it and you will feel it every single time. What's up, dude? Give me 1 second.
HDMI?
I have an HDMI. Yes. What the hell does a distributor mean? God damn. I'm explaining rollback netcode. Hold on. Yes, delay-based netcode is like, you know when JDCR opened my door right there? Delay-based netcode is like that. You're in the middle of something and then it just, it freezes and it stutters and it's like, and it's breaking. Rollback netcode is like if he opened the door and I just kept speaking. NQ, you have to understand that Street Fighter's rollback netcode is badly implemented. It's not the correct way to think about rollback. Imagine if I told you that firefighters are good at putting out fires. And then you're like, well, there's this one firefighter who shoots his hose in the wrong direction and the fire doesn't go out. And I'm like, okay, well, look, 99% of other firefighters, they point their hose at the correct direction and fires go out. And you're like, yeah, but this guy, he's aiming at the tree over there instead of the house. And I'm like, okay, well, look, there's one rogue firefighter and he is just awful. He is maybe the worst example of a firefighter ever. But every other instance of a firefighter is putting out fires. My tax dollars are paying for that rogue firefighter. That's me buying Street Fighter V and being like, God damn it. Yeah, there's something wrong with Street Fighter V's implementation of rollback netcode. There's some issue with the syncing between the two games where they constantly have really weird, messed up rollbacks that shouldn't occur like they do. I can't tell you what is exactly wrong with it because I'm not a programmer and I don't work on Street Fighter. I didn't work on Street Fighter V. Tony Cannon and others have theorized that they don't sync the clocks correctly, so one side is ahead of the other. They should be at the same thing, so they're like this. They're moving like this. But the theory is that in Street Fighter V, one of them is slightly ahead. So instead of being like this, it's like this. So when they both try to roll back, one game state is still ahead of the other, and it's messing something up. If the rollback is working correctly and the connections are not extremely bad, you should almost never notice it. The game will look and feel like you are playing with no latency, right? It'll look and feel perfectly normal. If there is some big drop in connection, what will happen in a rollback solution, if it's visual, is you will see a slight teleport or wiggle or something. As opposed to a delay-based solution where when there is a big drop, a similar level of connection issue, the game will freeze. The only time something in GGPO that's reaction-based would be like really bad is if the connection is really bad. And in that case, the delay-based version of it would be like, 5 or 6 frames or something really bad. Yeah, KI is awesome with rollback. It's very, very good with rollback. And KI has tons of reaction-based stuff. In fact, KI combos are about reacting to moves and breaking them. KI is a reaction-based game. Medium doubles, you have to be pretty on point to react to. And I don't think I've ever played a connection that is bad that I can't break a medium auto double on. Even when I played people in France. Imagine this, right? Imagine with current playable connections on a delay-based solution, if you're 2 states away, you can play a delay-based solution. Imagine if your rollback solution allows you to play with someone who's like 5 states away easily, and 10 states away maybe, right? Even just that distance increases the amount of people you can play with by like 100 times or something. Because for me, when I play on a rollback solution, I can play with people anywhere in the US. And if you're on the East Coast, you can play with people on the West Coast, or you can play with people in Europe. Even that idea alone, to me, seems worth having maybe one rollback where a slow-mo happened, but it didn't actually happen, then it looks weird. Compared to a delay-based solution where instead of me getting that floor break rolled back, I try to do the floor break combo and my character just goes, and I just drop it. People always say that rollback real-time physics is really CPU heavy and could cause other problems. I always hear that. And every time people who work on GGPO and stuff say, I mean, yeah, it's sort of CPU heavy, but it's not really a huge issue. And if you're going to think only about the problems with GGPO, you have to talk about the problems of delay-based netcode as well, right? And if you want to talk about the problems with delay-based netcode and compare them to GGPO, we have a long, long list of shit that could come up for delay-based solutions that just feels fucking bad. Would GGPO help if I played someone in Ecuador on Wi-Fi? The answer is actually yes. As funny as that question is, right? The answer is yes. It would make the connection feel much better. I played people on Georgia on GGPO without issues, not the state, the country. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I played GGPO Third Strike with Infilament, who lives in East Coast Canada from Southern California. His download speed is like 5 or something, right? Like his internet is absolutely horrible, and we play Third Strike online with GGPO or Killer Instinct. We played both. We talked about GGPO a bit. As expected, people came in, and rows and rows and rows of people came in to talk about GGPO, which is cool. The fact that people are interested makes me happy already. Even if they are wrong about some of the stuff, at least they're interested.